Hey everyone, and today will be my first impressions of the Samsung Galaxy S23 Ultra, and this will be kind of from an Apple user's perspective because I now do use an iPhone 14 Pro Max, so we'll do a little camera comparison just to see how these two flagships stack up against each other. Also, just want to give a shout out to Nakash for giving me hands-on with this phone. I really appreciate it, but let's just dive into it. So taking a look at the front, we have that beautiful 6.8-inch dynamic AMOLED display, same as last year, same resolution, 3088 by 1440, very similar in terms of the bezels, the brightness, the overall color to contrast ratio. Everything is very similar to last year. But I guess as the saying goes, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. This is still a beautiful display, very vibrant, very colorful, and overall is super high in terms of the crispiness. The viewing experience is excellent when watching content, the minimal bezels make for a really pleasant experience, and the screen is slightly less curved at the edges, which I personally like. It is a bit more boxy and flat-like on the sides, and it does have rather sharp corners. This phone is pretty big, and when you're holding it in your hand, I do find the corners are just a little bit sharp and kind of stick into your hand a little bit, so I personally prefer the more rounded approach of the S23 or the iPhone 14. And packed in the display, you still have the ultrasonic fingerprint scanner, which is just as reliable and super quick as last year. Now, not much may have changed on the outside, but on the inside, this phone is packing the new Snapdragon 8 Gen 2 chip, which makes this one of the biggest bump ups in terms of performance for a while from Samsung. This is a 40% increase compared to last year in terms of the Geekbench score and the overall processing speed. And I can say this phone definitely does feel snappy. It's rocking the new One UI. The new release focuses pretty much just on stability, permission changes, along with better privacy and security, and I'm personally not the biggest fan of how One UI looks. The notification panel just to me looks a bit old school and a bit cluttered, and the UI overall isn't as minimal as I would like it. I'm much more of a stock Android type of person, so I definitely do prefer the Pixel in terms of that new Material U design. I am digging that, so I really hope Samsung does change up their design a little bit. Now, considering the Ultra is pretty much what the Note series used to be, there is an S Pen in here, so you do get all the standard S Pen features like the remote features to operate the camera, as well as just having the hover feature and the smart select feature. So I'm personally not a big S Pen user, but if you are, then it's there. But now let's talk about the main upgrade of this phone, which is the camera. So obviously we now have that new 200 megapixel primary sensor. So it might be a little bit overkill, but it's always nice to have the ability to reframe your shots and punch in without losing that detail. This is definitely going to use a lot of storage, but in the camera options, you can actually just turn it down to 50 megapixels, or if you want, you can pixel bin all the way down to 12. On the back, you still have a standard 12 megapixel ultra wide sensor, as well as two 10 megapixel telephoto lenses, which allow for that crazy 100 times space zoom. The zooming capabilities on this phone are still king, and while the shots aren't amazing at full 100 times zoom, it definitely is a massive flex, and sometimes you can get fairly usable images. In terms of video performance, that also gets a bump up as well. You can now shoot 8K at 30 FPS, up from 24. Okay, so now we're doing a test on the back camera. So we have the iPhone 14 Pro Max on the right, Samsung Galaxy S23 Ultra on the left, and this is how they sound. So I'll have a little microphone switching between so you can hear what it sounds like on the Samsung and what it sounds like on the iPhone. But it's fairly low light conditions right now, so it will be a pretty good test to see how they look. But shooting in 8K is definitely going to take a hit at your storage as well as your battery life. So this phone has the same 5000 mAh battery as last year's S22 Ultra, but because that new processor in there, the Snapdragon 8 Gen 2, this phone boasts better battery life from Samsung on paper. And from our testing so far, we've got about 3 hours 26 minutes screen on time with 50% left in our phone. So overall, we're expecting to get 7 to 8 hours of screen on time, which is definitely good in terms of smartphone standards today. But the iPhone 14 Pro Max has 11 hours of screen on time and has a higher peak brightness of 2000 nits compared to the S23 Ultra's 1750 nits. So right now we're in this like forest area just by Anstruther in Scotland, and we have Nakash here with his S23 Ultra, so we're just doing a little camera comparison test. It's really kind of low light right now and everything's the same kind of color, so I don't know how it'll turn out, but we tested the zoom cameras as well as the video front-facing camera. I think we tested most of the things. We didn't test 8K yet. We might get some 8K shots. Both cameras are excellent, I would say. What's your favorite thing about S23 Ultra so far?
I think it's the zoom. The zoom is the best thing about it. I love taking zoom shots and having like that 10 times crisp zoom.
Yeah.
It is good.
That's one thing I miss switching from the iPhone to, switching from Samsung to the iPhone is the zoom. Sometimes I want to take a really zoomed in shot of like the moon, or if I'm at like some sort of concert or event, I want to like punch in, get a close shot. I cannot get that with my iPhone without it looking like literal trash. So let me go back to my my office and then we'll compare all the pictures side by side to see how they look. Okay, so I have both the photos now in my editor side by side, and I'm not going to tell you guys which one is which. I want you to guess. So guess down below in the comments whether you think the Samsung is on the left or on the right. So let's go into it. So this is the first photo up. This is of my friend Nakash. And on the left, I would say the highlights are just a little bit too bright on his face. On the right, they're a little bit more balanced, but both have really good dynamic range. The overall bokeh in the background is about the same, I would say. So yeah, not much difference in terms of the colors either. Let's jump to photo number 2. So in this one here, I would say there is a little bit of haze on the left photo. But the right photo, I would say, is a tad bit over sharpened. There's a lot of detail retained in both. I would say around the branches up on the left here, it's definitely a little bit more clarity on the picture on the right, and you can even see there's some of the sky, the blue coming through between the trees on the photo on the right as well, whereas on the left it just is kind of all very white. Zooming in a touch on the rocks here, I would say that there's a lot more detail in the photo on the left. So can you guys guess which one is which yet? Yeah, this one on the left is definitely more clear. You can see the one on the right is trying to over sharpen to compensate for the lack of detail. Damn, who is this good looking guy? So yeah, this is the front facing camera on both phones. Both of them are pretty good. The right photo is a little bit wider, but is it me or does the photo on the right have kind of a green yellowish haze to it? I'm not really a big fan of that. The photo on the left, to me, looks a bit more balanced in terms of the colors, and that's the photo I prefer. So while we were in the woods, we actually spotted there's like a wall with loads of holes, and they actually had coins from all over the world. So it had US coins, European coins, British coins, all stuck into this wall. And we actually took some out. I actually bought some stuff using the coins. But yeah, you can see from the photo here, there's a lot of detail in both. I would say, again, a little bit over sharpened on the right, but then on the left, it's kind of a bit too bright. You can't really see too many of the details. Boom. So this one right here is when we zoomed in 10 times. So 10 times optical zoom on the Samsung and 10 times digital zoom on the iPhone. Can you tell which one is which? The photo on the left is definitely more colorful, more saturation. And the photo on the right, a little bit over sharpened. You can see that it's getting a bit messy with all the little tree branches. So now this is like the max zoom we could achieve from both phones. So I would say this was like 100 times zoom. And as you can see, yeah, I think it's going to be really obvious right now which one is which. So yeah, okay, let's just skip to the chase. Photo on the right is the iPhone 14 Pro Max, and all the photos on the left have been from the S23 Ultra. So yeah, the one on the right is super grainy. Obviously, it's just digitally zooming into the telephoto lens, which is only 3 times. So yeah, it doesn't look too great. There's not a lot of detail. Oh, I really wish the iPhone would just up their optical zoom game. Like, seriously, come on, Apple. You need to like step up the game here. So on this picture right here, honestly, at the time, I kind of thought the iPhone picture looked better. Like previewing it on the smartphone screens, it looked better. But right now I can see there's a lot of over sharpening on the iPhone picture. Something I really like is there's a lot more focus on the camera, which was the subject of this photo. So there's a lot of bokeh and blur in the background. There's some nice depth on the Samsung picture. But on the iPhone, it's all kind of just in focus, which is odd. And it's just a little bit over sharpened. And there's even some noise in that shot. It was fairly low light conditions, but damn, that Samsung shot is clean. Like it's really, really clean. I'd say the white balance is maybe a touch off. It's a little bit blue, but really nice, really clean shot right there. So now this is the macro shots that we got. So Yeah, I would say the macro is definitely a lot better on the iPhone. The photo on the right here, it's all in focus. It's a lot crisper. You can also get a lot closer with the iPhone than you can with the S23 Ultra. I would say it's not that great. I mean, if you do need a macro shot, yeah, it's okay, but there's a lot of distortion, there's a lot of blur. The focal point is really narrow, so it's really hard to actually get like the thing you're wanting in focus. Again, here, it's just a lot clearer on the iPhone. I would say neither of them are like amazing, but the iPhone one is definitely better. When we were walking back to our car, we decided to just take a picture of this church. Ideally, we wanted it to be sunny and blue sky and looking really beautiful, but it was cloudy. I mean, it is Scotland, so yeah. This is how the photo turned out, very dull and gray, but both of them are pretty good. I would actually say here the Samsung over-sharpened, whereas the iPhone is a lot more neutral, which is odd. There's also a little bit more detail retained in the clouds, I would say, on the iPhone, and the grass is way over-sharpened on the Samsung. So I'm not a big fan. Colors are more accurate on the iPhone as well in this shot. This photo really surprised me. So we zoomed in as much as we could to the top of the tower of this church, and somehow the iPhone one looks a little bit sharper. So there seemed to be a lot of blur on the Samsung just from like hand movements, whereas the iPhone did a better job at like optically stabilizing the camera system while we were taking that picture. So I would say the Samsung's probably better, but considering the optical stabilization on the iPhone is better, it actually made the overall shot nicer on the iPhone, which is a really unusual circumstance. It was very windy out, but normally you're going to get better zoom shots on the Samsung. I really like this shot. So we went inside the church. There was like a little door opening. We went inside and you could see this beautiful colored glass pane in the window. And honestly, I really like this shot. It was very dark where we were. There was no lights, basically no windows apart from this one. So very dark conditions. We exposed both of them. So they were night mode for 5 seconds. And I would say both of them did a good job. The iPhone, I would say, has a little bit more detail in those shadows, but overall very, very similar, honestly. I mean, I don't even know how to compare them. They're really similar. This photo was kind of a last minute thought, but it's a good way of checking the dynamic range on these. So yeah, we took a picture of Nakash standing in this doorway of the church. You can see the highlights are, I would say, kind of equally exposed on both. The tree is kind of a weird color on the iPhone. The overall colors are just a bit green tinted, and the white balance is kind of off. But I would say on the Samsung, you have all these weird artifacts. There's all these like red kind of strange artifacts going around the doorway, and they were not there in real life. So guys, that is it. That's my first impressions of the S23 Ultra. Really clean phone. I love the design, the simplicity of it. It's just a really premium phone to hold. And comparing it side by side with the iPhone cameras, I would say the majority of the times Samsung does do a better job, but in those rare occasions there are, you know, artifacts, over sharpening, a little bit of blur, kind of some off white balance at times. No camera is perfect, but I would say the Samsung is pretty good. I've compared the Pixel 7 Pro to the iPhone 14 Pro Max, and I kind of thought the iPhone was better. Now, Pixel's better at processing, but when you're just taking raw pictures, the iPhone actually does a better job. Comparing it to the S23 Ultra, it's controversial. You know, it's all about your opinion. So let me know down in the comment section below, do you prefer the iPhone or the S23 Ultra? I already kind of feel like I know what the answer is going to be, but let me know anyway, regardless. But that is it, guys. So if you could subscribe, smash the bell icon, smash the like button, and I will see you later. Peace.